Savannah Locke, how in the world are you today?
I'm doing great, Lee. How are you feeling?
I'm good. So it's gotten hot here in Nashville, Tennessee.
Heat wave.
It's very hot.
I'm feeling it.
Yeah.
Today I saw someone running like at 11 a.m. and I thought, couldn't be me.
Are you still running?
I've been doing some mileage, but no, I'm not a heat person.
Yeah. Heat's tough.
I probably should just join the Y to be in air conditioning.
You could do that. Yep.
Hey, I was actually thinking about this the other day. Mm-hmm. You know how you were doing your little mini experiment?
With the YMCA? Yes.
Has that kept going?
Well, so the mini experiment was getting up early and going to the Y first thing in the morning. Mm-hmm. And we got knocked off of that with Winter Storm Fern.
Oh, yeah.
And so it didn't last very long. But actually, I have just restarted that. And I love this new iteration of it that I'm hoping I can stick with for a good long while.
Isn't it like 5:30 or 6 in the morning?
Yeah, I'm trying to be out the door by 6. Wow. So hopefully exercising while fasted still is really interesting.
Yikes.
Yeah.
That's dark. Yeah. Lee, are you reading or watching or listening to anything recently?
Let's see. We've been watching Unconditional. Do you know Unconditional?
I have never heard of this.
It's about a Israeli mother whose daughter is arrested and put in prison in Russia. And it's a fascinating...
You are an Apple TV hound.
It's a fascinating what's going on, who's telling the truth, who's a liar, who's the scoundrel, layers of scoundrelism.
The scoundrel.
Scoundrelism, layers of scoundrelness.
And you can quote you on that.
Yeah, you can quote me on that.
I love how you are such an Apple TV person, which actually makes sense for you.
It does it?
It's sort of like the intellectual streamer.
Apple TV is? Mm-hmm. Huh. I do, yeah. We've definitely enjoyed a lot of shows on there.
I love it.
That and BritBox. We love a good BritBox mystery.
Do you watch Father Brown?
No. That's a different version of BritBox.
Okay, so tell me, what is the... I actually love Father Brown, but go ahead, tell me.
Well, like Luther or... some of the ones that are a bit more gritty.
Gritty.
Yeah.
The ones that have teeth.
The ones that have teeth. The ones that have teeth, yes.
Mm-hmm. I get that. Well, I absolutely love that, Lee. Lately, I've been listening to, you'll love this actually, podcasts on physics.
Oh, really?
You know
Is
things
that what it's
about
called?
physics.
Podcast on physics?
No, I've just been listening to podcasts.
Oh, podcasts on physics.
On or about physics.
Yeah, good for you. Isn't it amazing? The world is so freaking amazing.
And it's kind of scary. It's scary. Okay, Lee. So I was listening to an episode today that was basically saying, you know how like a law of physics is that energy can't be created or destroyed. Uh-huh. So the episode that I was listening to today was talking about how that is true for our observable like world or testable world. But the nuance to that is dark energy, which is the energy that keeps on appearing as the universe expands. So as the universe expands, which it's doing at an accelerating pace at all times, energy is filling that up that space. And that energy that's filling up that space is called dark energy. So in that sense, energy is created, but not like on Earth. Do you know what I mean? That's what they were saying in this episode.
I see. I've always found all that dark matter, dark energy stuff. I kind of get it in theory, but I get lost in the weeds on all that stuff.
Yeah, because like, how do we know that energy is there?
Yes.
Do you know?
No.
I don't either.
I mean, I have read stuff about how they detect it, but I don't remember how they do.
It's basically these two best friends who are like, one is a particle physicist and the other one is just a regular physicist. And I just think that they're so sweet and they just nerd out together.
I would love to listen to that. What's the name of it?
I don't know. I'll find it and I'll send it to you. And we can add it in the show notes. We can link it in case anyone else wants to do it. But today's episode title was called, or the one that I listened to today was called can energy be conserved?
Hmm.
And the majority of people today would say, yes, it can be. But what they're saying is that not necessarily.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating.
That's great.
So I'm on a big physics kick.
Yeah. Good for you.
I don't get it, but I'm trying to learn.
Yeah. I've got a bookshelf with all of my science and physics kind of stuff. And so I'll keep reworking through some of those kinds of things. And I love that stuff.
And it's just wild how we know a lot, but we don't know
how
a
much
lot.
we do not know. Yes.
Like even with the idea when they were talking about, in another episode, they were talking about how we observe all of this energy that makes up the entire world, but that no one knows where this all came from. And so like what a lot of scientists will say, well, the Big Bang, but it's like what caused, no one knows. And then it brings me back to like when I was growing up, like very like creation versus evolution. But I'm like, how amazing is it that we literally just don't know?
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Where all of this came from.
Right. It's remarkable.
It is remarkable. So anyways, on that note, let's start the show.
This episode is brought to you by Starbucks.
That is fire.
Whoa, that's good.
This might be the drink of the summer.
Okay, I like this one too. I'm rocking with it. Okay.
Try it for yourself. Starbucks Refreshers Concentrates are coming home. Find them in the coffee aisle and make it yours.
Need a laptop that's built to perform and designed to last all day? Select Windows 11 PCs starting at $499.99 are now at Best Buy. Learn more at bestbuy.com. Best Buy. Imagine that.
I wrote a little song to remind you, Choice Hotels get you more of the experiences you value. The Cambria Hotel's got it all. A rooftop bar, have a ball. Bring a date, your squad, or even your mom. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
Welcome to the Subtext, where we go beneath the headlines, beneath physics, and beyond the obvious. I am Savannah Locke.
I'm Lee C. Camp.
If you like the show, here's your official permission to give us a review so that the algorithm sends us to other people.
Yes.
The algorithm sent us to me on my Spotify.
The algorithms sent us to
Sent
you?
our show to me, to my personal Spotify.
Oh, how about that?
It said, you might like this.
How about that?
And I thought,
And you thought, yeah,
yeah,
maybe.
I think I would like
Maybe,
that.
yeah.
I think
You
so.
at least like one of the co-hosts.
Depending on the day. Yeah. Who knows? Who knows? So yeah, give us a review, follow us, rate our show, and review wherever you're listening. Give us 5 stars, and then we might read your review on the show. You can watch full episodes on YouTube and Spotify and stay connected on Instagram at The Subtext Show, at Savannah_Locke, and at Lee C. Camp. If you have thoughts, questions, or hot takes, just send them our way in the DMs. Lee, today we are talking about, I feel like one of your favorite subjects.
Money?
Yeah.
Why do you think that's one of my favorite subjects?
I just feel like this subject kind of sometimes brings out your Baptist voice.
Well,
Money and nationalism.
I guess we'll see.
We'll see.
I guess we'll see. Won't
One
we?
can only hope. But this is what got me thinking about this. Elon Musk became a trillionaire.
I heard that
He's back.
Brother Musk became a trillionaire.
To slumming it with the billionaires at this
Yes,
point.
Yeah, poor
But
guy.
when SpaceX began trading, his net worth surged to somewhere between $1.1 and $1.4 trillion. The highest that anyone has ever been. And then a few days later, stocks tumbled. And now he's back down to $950 billion.
Oh, wow, that's tough.
So sad to think about for him.
1.4 trillion, which is 1,400 billion, which is 1,400,000 millions. It's crazy.
It's crazy to think about, isn't it? And it got me thinking about a couple of months ago on the show, you said something to the effect of, I hope we do an episode on money soon so I can talk about.
Yeah, I've thought about that and think, I wish I hadn't said that.
Well, I'm thrilled now because now we get to. So, I want to talk a little bit about a couple of things. One, you just kind of alluded to it, but I saw someone post underneath the announcement of Elon Musk being a trillionaire. And this is what they said. 1 million seconds ago, it was last Tuesday. 1 billion seconds ago, it was 1994. 1 trillion seconds ago was before the peak of the last ice age. Mammoths and saber-toothed tigers still roamed the earth.
That gives it a little perspective.
That is the difference between 1 billion and 1 trillion. It is the difference in time between watching Forrest Gump win Best Picture and getting eaten by a saber-toothed tiger.
Yes.
Which I thought was a very good way
Very helpful perspective.
of showing the exact kind of wealth gap that we're dealing with here.
Yes, indeed.
So let's talk about money.
Okay. What do you want to talk about it?
I feel like we've sufficiently, for now, talked a lot about billionaires, now trillionaires, and capitalism. Like, I feel like we rail on that quite a bit on this show.
Do we?
Okay, let's go harder. Let's do it.
Well,
I feel like I at least bring it up a lot.
Well, I mean, I imagine that whenever I said whatever it is I said, I have thought about and had some really interesting experiences where I've learned a lot through trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
And probably one of the reasons I don't feel so excited about talking about this is it's a vulnerable point for me in various ways. As we'll see what follow-up questions you ask and how much that vulnerability comes out. But, I was raised in a upper middle class family.
Mm-hmm.
We were very comfortable. My wife was raised in an upper middle class family. And when she and I, and I'm embarrassed about this story I'm about to tell, but when she and I were dating, I went through a discernment process with regard to my sense of vocation and came away thinking, okay, I think I need to step away from what I thought I was going to do in science kind of world and maybe science business kind of world, and instead do teaching or ministry or be a missionary or something like that. And so at some point, I was sitting with who I was dating, who became my wife later. And this is the part that I'm embarrassed about because it shows youthful arrogance. But I said something like, I think I could be a millionaire by the time I'm 28, but I'm not going to do that.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
And instead, I think I'm going to go be a teacher or a missionary. And what do you think about that? And so that began this kind of process of her buying into, okay, this means that we're going to make some choices. That means we're not going to be as comfortable as we were growing up. And I don't regret any of those, and I'm really thankful for that. But we learned a lot of hard lessons. I mean, we were from an American perspective, we were often pretty poor.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I remember I think our adjusted gross income, for example, the year our first child was born was something like $12,000, and we were on welfare. We took welfare to get enough stuff to feed our kid and feed us. And I was always working 3 or 4 jobs when I was in grad school and that sort of stuff. And so we knew what it was like to be tight. I have this memory of the seminary years before, we were seminary years at first, and then later it was graduate school years. Seminary years, I remember going and trying to sort out whether or not we had enough money to get an ice cream cone at McDonald's. And we would look in you used to have ashtrays in cars.
Yeah.
We would look in the ashtray to see if we had the 29 cents or whatever to go get the ice cream at McDonald's. And so we knew what that was like. But again, we were happy, we didn't go hungry, and we had friends that were all poor with us. And so it was good. So that was one part of my life, early part of my life. And then another kind of element that I'll mention about that is that we also went through a time where we didn't have insurance, and we learned a lot about what it means to try to navigate the medical system when you don't have insurance. And the medical system is simply not set up to answer any questions for people who don't have insurance. And it's like when you're asking questions about insurance when you're having a baby, they're like, "What the heck are you talking about?" We don't have time to answer your questions about what this is going to cost and that sort of stuff. And so. And we learned.
Did Laura have a baby when you guys weren't insured?
Yeah, we were on we were like in this co-op of people that we would all kind of say how much we had spent on X, Y, or Z, and then we would split
like
up
a ministry insurance. Yeah.
But we didn't have insurance.
Yeah.
And so you're like literally asking these questions because it's going to cost so and so over in Indiana, this much more money if you don't do a good job spending the money.
Right.
And so. One of the things that kind of stuff taught us is how much more expensive it is to be poor than to be rich.
Yep.
And a lot of people are oblivious to that fact. And I'm always grateful that I learned that fact about American life. Another huge piece in this was that between seminary and grad school days, we got to go to Nairobi, Kenya for 6 months. And what I learned there was that global poverty is a completely different thing than American poverty. And I remember sitting in the car a week or so before we were leaving to go to Nairobi, listening to a public radio story. Have I told this story before? And I was listening to a public radio story, and at the time the global population was 6 billion people, and a new survey, Global Wealth Survey, had just come out that said that 2 billion people on the planet lived on $2 a day or less. And I stopped the car to listen to the rest of the story before I went into the house, and I thought, I can't fathom what it means to live on $2 a day, even though we were, didn't have much money ourselves, but still I couldn't fathom what it meant to live on $2 a day or less. And within 2 weeks, I knew I was now making friends among people who lived on $2 a day or less. And so that humbled me a great deal, and then gave me a different kind of set of lenses, which I often didn't navigate very well, because I came back to the U.S. and I was just kind of pissed off for a long time because I realized we're over here worrying about X, Y, and Z when we are oblivious to the pains and the hurts and the people around the world. And so those are at least parts of my story. I'll stop there, and anything else you want to say or give feedback on. I have other things to say that we can get into later, but that's a good place for us to start a little bit.
No, I mean, I actually think that where you were just landing is what I would love to talk about, is like holding that tension in mind of recognizing the realities of billions of people across the world who are living in terms of global poverty with much less than people in America, while also naming our reality in America or in the United States of how much money it takes to survive.
Yeah.
So how did it was that next era when you learned that lesson and how to sit in that tension?
Yeah. So coming back to the States, that sort of lived experience of seeing things that I had not ever imagined, and the resentment, frankly, that I had coming back to American culture that felt so indulgent, that was compounded by the classic consciousness raising that's entailed in graduate school and American higher education, right? Because so much of American higher education is about, in the humanities especially, is about trying to help you see how much crap there is in the world.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And so it compounds the kind of anger and the frustration that I had.
Yeah.
And so, if anything, that stuff kind of got stirred up all the more. And yet still there were the kind of lived realities that you were just saying of, now, yeah, I do know that relative to my friends in Nairobi, I have so much more, but then I'm also trying to figure out how to pay the medical bill, right?
When you go to the hospital and you say, how much is this epidural going to cost?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And you're still trying to figure out how you're going to have enough money to pay for the groceries, so that everybody's got enough to eat, right?
Right.
And so that kind of tension, continued on. And then we moved back to the Bible Belt. And I think that one of the things that really struck me moving back to Nashville is that Nashville being the buckle of the Bible Belt, and yet so often lacking any sense of modesty with regard to our consumption. And that was another big piece of me grappling and arguing and fighting with myself and frustrated with the world around me. That was a big deal.
Like arguing with yourself in terms of like your ego, or did you feel any like family pressure, society pressure, shame?
I would say it's all of the above. There's the shame piece, there's the envy piece.
Yeah.
And the frustration piece that I'm still working multiple jobs, because, when you work for nonprofits and you work for Christian higher education, you don't make a lot of money. So you're always going to have multiple jobs. And so it was all of that together.
And how did you grow in that? What did you learn?
Slowly. Sometimes there was just the exasperation of it. I remember one day having a conversation with a friend of mine who was a preacher at a large church, and you'll like this story. he had been asked by the church leadership to preach a sermon on modesty.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted him to preach about modesty for women in the way they dress. And so he was being honest about the fact that he had some serious pause about preaching said sermon. And I said, and I knew this church, and I said something like, well, I wonder, I said, if you, there's certainly things to be said about modesty with regard to the way we dress. And I said, but I don't know, from what I know about your church, it seems that y'all might have more trouble with lack of modesty with regard to the cars that you drive and to the houses that you all are building. And I said, maybe you could preach about that and then just mention the clothing thing as a part of that. And he said, oh, I could never do that. And I said, well, I think then you have a problem.
That's exactly what you need to be doing then. Yeah.
Right. And so that's another kind of one of those, we've talked on subtext about selective moralism, and that's another classic selective moralism thing, right? And so we want to pick on the one thing over there, but we don't want to look at all this other stuff that we're just lock, stock, and barrel in with our consumerist, our conspicuous consumption and all that kind of stuff. So I've continued to feel a lot of frustration that given how much the New Testament and Old Testament both talk about wealth and talk about money, that it's just not simply presumed that you're going to give some serious thought to the conspicuous consumption that is celebrated in our culture, right? Why can't we want to talk about pushing back against cultural Christianity. Can't you push a little bit on the thing that the Bible talks about over and over and over and over and over again, rather than the things it talks about just a few times? And so that's continued to be a piece that's bothered me, frustrated me, I think about a lot. And then I think another kind of piece, a couple of things that happened along the way. One would be that we came to a point where we'd been back in Nashville, 3-4 years. And at that moment, because of some various things, we were having to start relying upon credit cards a lot. And our credit card debt was just creeping up. And we finally had a conversation where we said, we don't know how we're going to do this, but we can't keep doing this. And this will not end well. And we simply must stop. And so we made a commitment to each other. It doesn't matter what happens. We're not going to use our credit card for things that we have to think we have to pay for. And so I kid you not, like within a week, our car broke down. And we had a $500 bill on our car that we didn't know we were going to pay for. The car would still run, but we knew we had to get this thing fixed. And it was like $495 was the bid. And so we went to church one Sunday morning, and I was teaching a Sunday school class at the time at our church. And it's a church we're still a part of that we love. And we came home, and I kid you not, there was rolled up, and it makes me emotional. There was rolled up 5 $100 bills in a rubber band stuck in our back door. And I don't think we had told anybody about this.
Yeah.
Stuck in our back door. And it with a little note that says, a workman is worthy of his hire, quoting from Corinthians. And so that's one of the beauties of it, is that even though I was oftentimes envious, I was oftentimes resentful, I was oftentimes exhausted, I always knew, okay, when push comes to shove, God has provided for us. And we're thankful for that and deeply grateful for it. And then another thing, though, that I think I finally accepted that I had been obstinate about, going back to that conversation I had with my girlfriend at the time, of I think I'm called to this route and it means giving up this pursuit of this kind of money. I think I was presumptuous in assuming that because I had made that choice, that the money thing was going to be easy and I just wouldn't have to worry about it. And I finally realized, oh no, there is no entitlement for you, Lee. You have to deal with it like every other person has to deal with it. And that means you got to learn financial literacy. It means you have to learn about prudential savings. It means you have to learn about the basics of budgeting. And you're not exempt from being a grown-up human being and learning about how to deal with money. And so we started learning a lot more about how to deal with money and how to process money and how to think about money. And then the third thing I'll add quickly is that somewhere along the way, I was in this one particular group, and after the group one day, I had been probably griping about something about money, and because I couldn't pay a bill or something. And this one guy said to me afterwards, he said something like, he said, "Are you open to some feedback?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I've heard you talk about that kind of stuff quite a bit in this group." And he said, "I don't know. When I hear you talking about it, I hear this kind of language of scarcity a lot. And maybe you should just try leaning into thinking that there's going to be more abundance than you have yet imagined." And there's a part of that kind of feedback that I got that I'm very suspicious of, right? Because it rings all the health and wealth gospel kind of stuff that I do not trust and I find highly problematic, if not outright almost heretical. And yet, there was something true about what he said. And it's like, if I focus on there's not enough, then I make that a reality in my life. And if instead I have the posture of, okay, I don't know how, but there'll be enough, and we can work at this and figure out, my wife and I, we're both smart. We can figure this out, right? And stop letting there be this unnecessary pressure on us. Now, at the same time, I'm going to admit there's even in that a sort of presumption of some privilege.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to downplay that. But nonetheless, if I do presume scarcity, I can kind of make what I presume true. And if I presume a sort of enough, how about this? If I assume plenty and enough, then it turns out that very often there is plenty and enough. So I threw a lot at you, but I don't know. What do you want to say about
First
that?
of all, so beautiful. Yeah, I think what you're naming that I think is interesting of ways that I've seen Christians interact with money is, on one hand, more of the prosperity idea, which is name it and claim it. Like, I'm going to be a millionaire because God wants me to be a millionaire. And money comes to me and all of this manifestation stuff. On the other side of the spectrum, there are probably multiple sides of the spectrum, but on the other side of the spectrum, I see a fear of money, which is money is the root of all evil, which is in the Bible. The love of money is the root of all evil. Or all kinds of evils, I think is what the actual text says. And we should not have retirement accounts. We should live just for today. We should take vows of poverty, etc. And I'm actually not saying either. I don't know. I don't even know where I would fall in any of those camps, but that's just what I've noticed in terms of a lot of Christians presenting relationships with money in those sorts of ways. And I'm curious because I've actually heard hints of some of those pieces throughout your stories of how have you interacted in your relationship to money and how has that evolved over time? Have you ever felt yourself going to one category or the other? Have you felt yourself in a different category altogether?
I would say I've been all over that spectrum. I mean, I read, for example, enough of people like Dorothy Day and enough of people like James A. Harding, who you wouldn't know, but various people who said, we're just, we're giving away whatever and whatever we've got. James A. Harding, there's this one story I love about him, who he lived here in Nashville, I think at the time, and he loves cigars. And this would have been in the late 1800s, probably in the poverty after the war years, maybe. And he had gone to town and bought himself some cigars. And right after he got home, there was a knock on the door, and he went to the door, and there was a young woman that was asking for help and needed some money. And he had spent the last money he had on those cigars. And he closed the door and sent her away. And his wife said, if you hadn't bought those cigars, you'd have had something to give her. And so he renounced for them at that point forward. He didn't smoke any more cigars from that point forward. And so, there are people like him and Dorothy Day and so forth that I think they're saints. And I think that it's beautiful. And I think that if we don't find ourselves convicted by their stories, then we're not paying enough attention. to the gospel, and we're not paying enough attention to the beauty of all that. And then I also think that poverty should never be romanticized in any way whatsoever. But the beauty in stories like Dorothy Day is that it was voluntary poverty, not involuntary poverty. And she always made that distinction, right? You know, you don't romanticize involuntary poverty, but there's a great beauty in voluntary poverty. And I think there is a great beauty in voluntary poverty. I also suspect these days that there's a sort of sense of vocational calling about that, some of that kind of stuff. And I know for me, I either wasn't able or was unwilling to fundamentally take that kind of vow in my life. You know, I knew I was going to go this direction, which meant I wasn't going to have a lot of excess. But I wasn't committing myself to Dorothy Day kind of poverty. And then once you start having kids, then there are other kind of commitments and responsibilities that you've made. That means that, okay, you've got some financial responsibilities you're going to have to tend to if you're going to have kids that to be taken care of. And, you know, others might, and listeners might have some of their own experience to say, no, there's still some other ways, Lee, that you haven't even thought about here. And I would love to hear about them. But for me, it was a sort of, I finally got to the point of where I realized refusing to take more seriously getting some sort of fiscal stability under us wasn't working with my inability to let go of my anxiety. And my anxiety was so high and so through the roof without having some sort of fiscal sturdiness underneath us and underneath our household that I wasn't being much use. You know, it was undercutting my use to the world and use to my family. And once we began to say, okay, let's attend to this and get our house in order with regard to this, and let me ask some questions of my employers, and let me ask some questions about business possibilities to make this stop being such a stress, then I think I was of more use to the world. And I've given away a whole lot more money than I ever would have otherwise. And so, and that's one thing that I'll also throw in there is that Laura always insisted, no matter how little we had, we're giving away 10%, you know. And we also haven't. Oh my
gosh, I love her.
Yeah. We haven't even talked about Jubilee stuff. But that's another kind of you know, huge piece in all this. But let me stop there for just a second.
Yeah, I'm happy that you said that because one of my favorite books that I read last year, I guess now, was Poverty by America. Have you heard of that book before?
I think I have, but I don't know anything about it.
Poverty by America was written by Matthew Desmond. And he basically talks about how your point, you said it very succinctly, was that it's more expensive to be poor than rich in America. But he also talks about and documents all of the health issues that come from not having enough money, all of the accessibility issues in terms of education, childcare, safety, housing issues, mold being in housing and not being able to advocate because of landlords, because everything is sort of rigged against the poor in the United States. And I think reading that pushes back for me against, but I'm so thankful that you gave the categories of voluntary and involuntary poverty. The romanticization of involuntary poverty. So I think that for me, I want to be able to hold in one hand, taking Jesus 100% seriously, that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than it is for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. Like, I'm haunted by that passage. I was thinking about it last night. In the mercy of the next verse of the disciples being like, then who's going to make it? And Jesus saying, well, with man it's impossible, but with God all things are possible. The fact that that is about a rich person entering the kingdom of heaven is insane. So taking that so seriously. And also saying that I don't want people to be poor. And how can I advocate for better systems and policies and perhaps charity that enables people to get out of systemic poverty?
Right. Yeah.
That's where my mind goes.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously in America, one of the big things that we're always having to deal with and that we insufficiently deal with in American church context is free market fundamentalism. And but there's so many free market fundamentalist assumptions, I think, in American church culture that reduces everything to the individual choice as if that's the solution to everything. And that's just idiotic. I mean, it's, and I don't mean to be short or disrespectful, but it's completely uninformed. And there's study after study after study. There's all sorts of stuff that shows this stuff and the systemic nature of these things. That's not to say, as individuals, we don't need to grow in various virtues. Of course we do, right? And virtues of frugality, virtues of industry, virtues of hard work, and so forth and so on. Yes, of course. But that doesn't mean that the systemic nature that makes it so difficult for folks to get a leg up, a foot up in American culture, those systemic realities are very real. And so that's another huge piece of all this that I think, again, if you're going to take the Bible seriously, then you have to be taking those questions seriously. Why don't we have more sermons about that stuff? It boggles my mind that people are taking that presumably taking seriously wanting to be Bible-based Christians. And you don't hear a word about that kind of stuff. But it's throughout Scripture over and over and over and over again. So yeah, I think all of that stuff has to be addressed.
And I like the idea that you were talking about of modesty in relation to finances. It reminds me of the fruit of the Spirit, the self-control piece. And last year I was thinking a lot about self-control as it relates to opportunity and to money. Of just because I can doesn't mean that I should. And that being a way that the fruit of the Spirit of self-control could be played out in my life is saying like, yeah, just because I can go on that trip does not mean that I should.
Yeah.
Or just because I can buy that jacket does not mean that I should. And that there's an element of like, it's almost like fasting or something of saying like, I don't need to do that. And it does not need to be impulsive in terms of like a personal rhythm or application for me of what I've been trying to play out by. But then simultaneously in like to add muddiness to the equation of like, we talked about this, we just got a financial advisor because I am thinking when we are in our 60s, I want to be set up.
Yeah.
And I don't know. IDK, both of those exist in my world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think about, with something like retirement, as far as I know, your options are three. That one, you keep working as long as you can. Two, you've made some sort of financial arrangement so that you have some sort of financial independence based upon Social Security and whatever else you've saved. Or three, you're relying on your kids. And I don't want to rely on my kids, and I don't want to be beholden to a paycheck and an employer when I'm 78. And so again, because of the free market assumptions and the tilt towards individualism in American culture, it is a reality that if you're not going to take one of those two other options, then you are going to have to do some sort of savings, right? And for me, the question becomes, okay, still, then how much is enough?
Yeah, how much is enough?
And how much of this is greed, and how much of it is envy and trying to keep up with some other kind of people, and how much of it is what you need. And so it's an ongoing process of discernment, I think. I will say one other thing about this that I've found helpful is that I think there should be a lot more conversation in our context of trust where we talk about money, and we don't. I don't. Generally speaking, we don't. But
are you saying like personal finances with friends, or are you saying like in churches
or maybe that as well, right?
Okay.
I do remember. I think it was Stanley Hauerwas I'd read that said we ought to stand up in church and tell everybody how much money we make.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, maybe we should. And so I next time I was talking about money in a Sunday school class, I think I was talking about Sermon on the Mount or something. I told everybody my salary. I told everybody my salary, but it's like, well, maybe we should talk about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because then there's a sort of communal accountability. Now that can go awry really quickly with various forms of control and power and all that kind of stuff. But in a healthy context, it can be really helpful.
So we're so transparent with our finances with our friends.
Huh.
We actually do practice this. And this has been important to me since day one, like when we got married. With the life group that I had for like almost 10 years, everyone knew what we made and even what was in our savings. And then one of my best friends, who is currently single, basically wants to set herself up for success. And so she has created this like board of directors in her life. And every year she will do a spreadsheet. This is what my finances are like. This is what my plan is. This is how much I'm making. This is how much debt I have, whatever. And ask for advice.
Oh, that's great.
And this like transparency piece, there can be an awkwardness around it, but then there's also this piece of it creates like level playing ground and like mutuality and some like communal care elements too of recognizing like, hey, we have some flexibility that maybe you don't have. We can take care of this. We'll take care of the food. We'll take care of whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I love that.
It is nice because we're all very open about money. But also none of us are making millions of dollars. Yeah. And I have noticed that with people who make a lot more, I don't know if it's like a shame piece or a privacy piece or what, that there is more trepidation around sharing those kinds of things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can see that being the case.
Yeah. But it does creates a lot of good transparency, I think, and vulnerability. And so far, nothing's gone wrong.
We decided when we were talking about moving from one house to buying another house in Nashville, I kind of went through a discernment process with several people and said, okay, this is how much, because these days what we paid for that house is like, you can't buy a house in Nashville.
It would be sickening. I can't even think about it. Yeah.
But for then it was in 2005, it was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I never dreamed we would spend that much money on a house, you know? And so I talked it through with various people and said, this is what we think our house is going to sell for. This is how much we think it will cost us.
Yeah.
And give me feedback and thoughts and so forth. And so just having people that I can process that kind of thing, because I think at a minimum, if I assume as a disciple of Christ, I assume I'm going to give some account for some of this stuff. And then I just lean into that. It just opens my eyes up to see things that I wouldn't see otherwise. And I think think about the ways in which, so seldom, in my experience, the people who might take some job because of the climbing of the social ladder or the financial ladder, uproot their family and move across the country. How often do people have a conversation with the people that they trust in their faith community and say, okay, we're thinking about taking this job. Should we go do it or not? Right. And I do know stories of people who have said, we're not going to do that unless our local church or our life group says, yeah, we think you should.
Yeah,
right?
I do too. Mm-hmm.
And if you kind of assume, okay, yeah, that sort of accountability or that sort of open conversation, it just changes your perspective on all of this stuff.
It does. It makes it less of an individual thing and more of a communal process, which I really love. Yeah. I think too, the ego piece is what I'm hearing from not your ego. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess your ego, but like the ego work that's involved with money.
Yeah.
Of shame and recognizing social hierarchies and structures and choosing a more modest life can bring about ego death, where at least in Nashville, it's like a fairly bougie place.
Yeah.
And it's
increasingly so
wealthy and everyone has so much and it's so nice and whatever. And even like Todd and I, when we sold our house earlier this year, we started renting a house instead of buying another one because we just didn't know where we wanted to end up. And I found myself when people were like, oh, do you own it or rent it? I found myself squirming. As I said, we're renting. And I then wanted to follow up with like, well, we've owned 3 different houses over 10 years and blah, blah, blah. And we just didn't know. And I was like, oh, this is good for you. This is good for you to have to die to this part of yourself that thought it was impressive to own a house. Yeah. And when people come to our house, like I have not renovated it. It is from 100 years ago and it's magical, but it's not like super, super nice. And to walk in and let people just take it in versus every previous house I've had has been perfect because I renovated it from scratch every time. The ego death for me for that has been really good.
Yeah.
And Todd, my husband, has even noticed, he told me a couple of weeks ago, you're way less uptight about the way things look in the house. And I'm like, it is so true because I was identifying my status with the way that my house looked. And that's good for that to die.
Yeah, the layers of all this, so many, many layers, and the way it intersects with our sense of self and what we value in ourselves and other people, what we give our time to, what we give our attention to. And certainly for me, it's an ongoing process of screwing up, trying again, adjusting, letting go, working hard, all the above, right?
Same. Yeah, well, I hope people send in some feedback around this episode and maybe we'll keep the conversation going. I want this to be the beginning. Yeah.
And I would also be really interested to hear what are as I said, we didn't even get to the idea of the notion of Jubilee, which opens up another full, huge conversation. But I would be interested to hear from listeners what other big pieces of this did we not even get to that we might talk about?
And I'm sure there are so many. Thanks, Lee.
Thank you, Savannah. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Subtext.
Start a conversation with your friends, your favorite group chat, or even your enemies by sharing this episode with someone who might like to discuss it with you.
Want to become a part of the conversation? DM us, DM Savannah, email us your thoughts or topic ideas at info@nosmallendeavor.com.
Leave us a review wherever you're listening and leave us 5 stars. Follow us on socials at The Subtext Show, at Savannah_Locke, and at Lee C. Camp.
Very grateful to have you as a listener.
See you next Wednesday.